When you think about Irish food today, what usually comes to mind?
Potato.
Potatoes, right. A simple potato dish, maybe a stew, something sturdy.
Yeah, practical.
Exactly. The perception is that it's a cuisine defined by its simplicity, maybe even, bordering on bland.
And that simplicity, that's the thing. It's a scar. It's the scar of history, not the soul of the cuisine.
That's it. That is the core of our deep dive today. We're looking at sources that argue something really powerful, that the food was, and this is a quote, not poor, but was made poor.
Yes, it was stripped down. Systematically. By colonization, by a massive famine, and then by something just as powerful. Cultural shame.
So our mission here is to kind of excavate that lost complexity. We're looking at why a whole people would actively abandon their own recipes.
It wasn't just a trend, it was an act of psychological survival, a separation from trauma.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we even get to the lost dishes, we have to set the stage. We need the framework that created this kitchen in the first place.
You have to. To really appreciate the ingenuity, you have to understand the constraints. And historically, there were 4 massive pillars.
Right.
First, the climate. It's cold, it's windy. That right there limits what you can grow.
So that pushes you towards root vegetables, hardy stuff.
Right. Second, the land was fertile, but there was this perilous over-reliance on a single crop.
The potato.
The potato, a monoculture that fed people, but it was, well, the ultimate gamble.
A gamble that paid off terribly later on.
It did. Third pillar, the English colonial administration. Controlling the land, controlling resources, even what crops got prioritized.
And the fourth.
The fourth is the cataclysm, the historical wrecking ball. The Great Famine from 1845 to 1852.
So you put all that together, the land controlled the climate, the single crop, and the food that comes out of it. It starts to make a brutal kind of sense.
It does. It becomes a cuisine of, as our sources say, maximum survival with minimal ingredients.
It's not about finding new flavors. It's about caloric density, sheer efficiency.
It forces innovation, though. If you only have 2 or 3 things to work with, you become a kind of kitchen chemist. You're messing with temperature, with time, anything to squeeze out every last calorie, every bit of nutrition. These dishes weren't simple because the cooks were unskilled.
No, they were simple because they had to be hyper-efficient.
Exactly. And understanding that this was about brilliant resource management. That's the whole key.
Because otherwise you just dismiss it as peasant food. You miss the resilience baked right into it.
And that failure to see the resilience is what allowed the shame to creep in and take over.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the specific recipes that got, well, erased. Let's start with the one that really says everything about the potato. Boxty.
Ah, boxty. Yeah.
Today, if you see it, it's like a thick potato pancake for tourists.
Right. But the historical boxty was an engineering marvel born of pure necessity.
So
It wasn't just mashed potatoes. It was a very specific, rigorous combination of raw, grated potato and cooked mashed potato.
Wait, why both? Why raw and cooked?
That's the genius of it. The raw potato provides the starch, the sticky structural binding agent that you'd normally wash away. And the cooked potato provides the bulk, the softness. You combine them, and you get this maximally filling dish that needed almost no fat to cook. It could be stretched further than any simple bread. It was optimized sustenance.
And yet it just vanished.
Yeah.
Or it became this simplified shadow of itself. Why?
Trauma. Plain and simple. After the famine, any food that reminded people of those desperate years was tainted.
So eating something made from raw potato scraping
Became a sign of the absolute worst poverty. So as soon as a family got even a tiny bit of economic breathing room, abandoning boxty was a way to shed that shame. It was a signal.
We survived, we're moving on.
Exactly.
And that idea, food as a marker of social mobility, it shows up again with coddle.
Dublin's working class secret?
Yeah, if you find it today, it's probably pretty mild, maybe in a trendy pub.
Yeah. The historical coddle was a different beast entirely. It was harsh, powerful. It used bone-in scraps of meat, onions, potatoes.
And the technique was key, right?
The technique was everything. A one-pot meal, no frying, and it was cooked for a very, very long time, sometimes overnight.
Evening till morning.
That's the phrase, evening till morning. That long, slow simmer would just pull every last molecule of flavor and nutrition out of those cheap bones and vegetables.
And it was culturally significant. I mean, James Joyce wrote about it in Ulysses.
It was part of the city's identity, absolutely.
So if it was so important, why did it fade? Was it the same shame as boxy?
It was a different kind of shame. It was about modernity. As kitchens modernized in the 20th century, they got smaller faster.
And caudal is not fast.
Not at all. And crucially, it has a very strong, pervasive smell. That smell became incompatible with new urban living. To be seen as modern, as clean, people started to prioritize speed and, well, a lack of scent over that deep, slow flavor.
Wow. So they literally cooked the history out of their homes because it smelled poor.
In a way, yes.
Now, let's move beyond the potato. What about something like salt herring and oat mash?
Ah, yes. A vital dish for anyone near the coast. Sailors, rural populations, perfect balance of protein and fiber.
But it fell out of favor. Why? The stigma here was different.
It was. It perfectly shows how even healthy, necessary foods can be sidelined by culture. The ingredients, specifically the oats,
Right.
they came to be seen as animal feed.
For the very thing that sustained them became an embarrassment.
Exactly. As soon as cheaper industrial wheat flour became available, people switched, even if it was less nutritious. They wanted to prove they could afford grain for humans, not for livestock. The psychological need to not appear poor was stronger than the nutritional benefit.
It's a profound realization. That trauma and stigma were the real destroyers here. The post-famine years weren't just about hunger. It was societal amnesia.
It was a crucible. The Great Famine wasn't just a period of starvation. After relying so completely on the potato, the crop itself and all the recipes connected to it became linked with death, with desperation.
And the sources are very clear on this. People didn't just stop cooking the old food. They actively, consciously severed the memories.
Yes.
They wanted a culinary fresh start, even if the new food was simpler or less flavorful. It was about separating themselves from the horror.
And you see it in smaller dishes, too. Take scurrily, a really hearty dish of oats, onion, and animal fat, like suet.
Nourishing.
Deeply nourishing. But it vanished from kitchens?
Was that the oat stigma again?
Partly, but it was also about the fat. As industrial grains took over and a fear of animal fats began to creep in, that richness was seen as rustic, heavy, backwards.
So it had two strikes against it.
It did. The fear of fat and the preference for standardized industrial grain.
And then you have something like barmbrack. People know that one today. It's a sweetbread, a tea loaf.
But the original barmbrack was very different, far less sugary. Dried fruit was a massive luxury, not a staple you just threw in.
So what was its purpose?
Its function was its importance. It was central to the festival of Samhain, the precursor to Halloween.
Ah, the fortune-telling bread.
That's the one. They'd bake objects inside a ring for marriage, a coin for wealth. It was a ritual object.
So how did it become just a sweet cake?
The Industrial Revolution. Sugar and dried fruit got cheaper, more accessible. So the recipe adapted. It shifted from being a low-sugar, communal ritual bread to a simple holiday dessert. It traded its cultural depth for caloric sweetness.
We've looked at the ingredients, the psychology, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to talk about the techniques, the forgotten methods of this deep kitchen.
Technique is everything, especially when you have so little to work with. And historical Irish cooking was defined by methods that conserved fuel and stretched resources.
So not a lot of frying.
Almost no frying. It was heavy on boiling, simmering, slow roasting by the fire.
And that explains why the food tastes so different.
Completely. The flavor wasn't developed with spices they didn't have. It was developed with time. Hours of slow cooking creates these complex chemical reactions. It gently pulls every savory compound out of a bone, out of a vegetable. The food was deeply flavorful, not loudly seasoned.
I like that distinction. Deep, not noisy.
And the use of fat was crucial. It was never measured. A cook added it by feel, by instinct, based on what was in the pot, on who needed the calories that day. It was adaptive, not standardized.
This is great because now we can pull out some practical advice, some actionable takeaways from these archives. If you wanted to try and get that authentic flavor profile today, what are the key tips?
Okay, the records give us 4 really crucial pointers, and they all link back to that history of maximum resource management.
Go on.
First, with potatoes. If you're making a traditional grated dish, you never, ever drain the water.
But modern cooking tells you to rinse the starch off.
And that's the point. That cloudy liquid is the vital starch. It's the binding agent. Draining it is like draining the life out of the dish.
Okay, that's a big one. What's number 2?
Oats. To get that authentic, hearty, old texture for a dish like scurly, you use the oats raw, without toasting or roasting them first.
So you want that robust grain texture.
It's critical to how it's supposed to feel. Third, and this is the hard one for modern life, Embrace long cooking times.
Patience is the secret ingredient.
It really is. It's where the true depth of flavor comes from. It's just waiting.
Right. And the last one.
Seasoning. Salt was almost always added at the very end.
Why?
It let the cook taste the fully developed flavors after hours of simmering before making the final adjustment. And it helped control the liquid in the dish.
So what does this all mean? We started with this idea of simple, maybe even bland Irish food. And what we found underneath is this incredible story of resilience, trauma, and an active cultural erasure.
The conclusion from all our sources is pretty clear. The ingenuity and depth of historical Irish cooking were dismantled by famine, by colonization, and by the shame that followed.
So the rebirth we're seeing in Irish food now.
It depends entirely on calling back the forgotten recipes, on reconciling with that really painful history.
It's just a stunning example of how forces outside the kitchen can scar a culture's entire diet. The sheer amount of what was lost. It makes you wonder.
And that leads right to our final provocative thought for you to consider. This comes straight from the historians in our sources.
What's that?
If the Great Potato Famine had never happened, how would the Irish kitchen have developed? Would the potato have stayed king? Or would all these other resourceful, complex recipes have flourished and evolved into a world cuisine we might not even recognize today?
A fascinating alternate history to chew on. And if you want to dive deeper, you can explore some of the sources we used. Check out historical texts like the Oxford Companion to Irish Food, or even see how these foods are anchored in literature like James Joyce's Ulysses.
Until the next deep dive, keep learning, and maybe try cooking a little bit longer.